Hi, good to see you here, Mark, in Guildford, sunny Guildford.
Absolutely.
I've got a big question I've been wanting to ask you, Mark. Over the kind of last 20 years of, you running FP and founding FP 20 years ago with John Hughes, you must have seen things from all angles, and you've worked in pretty much every sector I can think of. But what do you feel procurement's achieved in that 20 years? Do you feel like it's lived up to the expectations that, it sort of tells the market? Do you feel like it's really lived up to its aspirations?
Up to its promises. Yeah. That's an interesting question. It does seem like there's a lot of the same sort of issues that are still discussed, be it stakeholder engagement, access to data, moving teams up the value chain, really trying to add more value to the organisation. They're the key themes that for me would be, and getting hold of people who are capable to play a more strategic role within the function is definitely, I guess, there's probably more maturity in certain organisations, but less, if you took the bell curve of organisations, that the majority are still fighting the same, I would say, or struggling with the same issues that they were 20 years ago.
What do you think is causing that? Why do you think that's happening?
Lack of investment, lack of attraction of the best calibre of people. I've had a discussion with SIPs about thinking about how we can get more business school courses to be relevant to procurement, to run modules on category management. So you get, not category management, but procurement. So you get a different flow of people coming into the function. And I still don't think it's marketed as an attractive sort of business option for people who are interested generally in business, hence the relevance for business schools, I think.
Yeah, it's a really good point actually around the kind of tying together better practices between business and business schools. What's been your experience of kind of managing that sort of interaction between academia and business and professional institutions? I think
there's probably less focus now than there was 20 years ago, because you had Andrew Cox and the guy at Exeter and Bath previously, Richard Lannick. But I don't know what the same sort of focus is on academia. It doesn't seem to be as relevant. We don't see as many articles or thought leadership that was coming out sort of 20, 25 years ago, for sure. And I think there's a bit of a gap. I know there's certain institutions that are trying to change that, but it's definitely something I think would help procurement thinking. Perhaps sometimes it just keeps going back to sourcing and use of competitive tension as being the basics. But actually I think there's lots more that people are aware of, and it's not really visible that where people are making progress, apart from where we've done those category management surveys over the last 10 years, we're starting to get under the skin of the real change engine of procurement.
That's a good point around the kind of research and surveys you've been doing with category management. And it also tells me that it puts a lot of pressure on CPOs to become those thought leaders within the industry if there's not really the academic kind of support at times to kind of push the boundaries of where procurement is. So I think it feels a bit unfair on CPOs to feel like they're the agents of change within the marketplace.
There's lots of repetition of people relearning the same stuff. Across all of the aspects of organisation structure, value measurement, capability and competency structures. Everybody's, there's no standards effectively, or there are limited standards, I would say. Certainly, not at the level of a practitioner where SIPS plays very strongly, but at the level of an organisation, people make it up as they go along, would be my observation. And yes, there's some fantastic practice and some people are doing really good jobs, and then you find that there's a lot of people relearning the same stuff, and it doesn't seem to have we're not building as much as we could do on experiences and learning and codifying it, which again is something we're really keen on, so that there is a progression in the overall capability of procurement. And so we're doing new things, not relearning the same mistakes that we've had before, or not addressing them at the root cause, which to me is around getting more capable people probably into the function overall.
It feels like a shame actually that we're having to go through that relearning a lot, and hopefully we can push through that. But it also makes me think that the CPOs of 20 years ago have changed into there are a number of new CPOs who have emerged through some of those dynamics. So have you seen a sort of difference between those who really lived and breathed where category management and other procurement best practices could go from 20 years ago compared to the newer generation of CPOs that might be coming on board? Have you seen any difference between the two?
Not to be honest, not particularly. I think there's a more focus on technology at the moment and the use of that. But then, if you're thinking about how you automate certain tasks, that's definitely taken up a lot of people's focus and investment time. But I don't think, to be fair, that we've seen too much change in the expectations of CPOs and the challenges that they've got and their orientation towards it. Just doesn't seem to be, quite the as I say, the sort of understanding of what was learnt in the past. How do we address that and know what the fundamental building blocks of creating a great procurement function is, and how do we sort of codify it, as I say, and systematise the thing so that it becomes, much more progressive.
Yeah. So on that progressive note, do you feel there's anything over the last 20 years that you feel has really stood out as, examples of progression and where you could potentially see best practices that you would see stand out over the last 20 years? Has there been anything that really has kind of...
Much more focus, there's definitely much more focus on behavioural skills and, recruiting people with that more generalised, I would say, collaborative mindset of working with the business. I think that's one area, certainly around data analytics. There are much more AI-enabled tools that really do let you get closer to the detail of the data than I think the old days when people were saying we can't find that. Well, you can if you employ the right tools to do that. So that to me is a big change. And I think the way that people have sometimes split roles more recently, I would say there's more of a trend towards saying, well, this is the strategic work and this is the sourcing work. And the strategic work includes, links to managing key suppliers, stakeholder engagement internally, and then coming up with a category strategy that is constantly iterated. I think that sort of focus of recognising that's a big role. You're not going to split that out from somebody who's running a 3-bid process or an online auction. There's different roles for people to play in procurement. I think that's probably the direction that we want to go in. And as those tasks become more automated downstream, we've got to look at the really value-added activities that are the ones that I think is much more towards the direction that we see CPOs want to recruit in that profile, and then find the automation route for the downstream activities that are probably more traditional.
Yeah. Well, really enjoyed talking to you today, and actually I want to talk to you more. There's loads of topics that we could go into a lot of detail around, so look forward to next time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.